Hello there, and welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast with Caleb and Johnny. I am
Johnny. I want to guess. Want to say
something like that, and you're Caleb.
Well, I am Benoit Blanc. I come from whatever accent Daniel Craig is doing.
Yours is even worse, though.
I do declare.
I say, I'm Foghorn Leghorn.
Foghorn Leghorn must have been his inspiration.
And hello, welcome to the first episode of Season 2.
Woo! Happy 2023, everybody.
Yeah, welcome to the Thunderdome, as I think this year is going to end up being called.
Is that what people are calling it?
That's what I'm calling it.
Oh, that's what you're calling it.
That's what I think it will
so
end up being.
So you think that there'll be lots of Australians dressed in leather fighting in domes?
That's just a Thursday in Perth, but anyway.
Make sure you laugh there, audience, because otherwise it's going to be very pitiable.
They're all going, where's Perth? What's Perth? Never heard of it.
Do you think our audience is that stupid?
Do you want me to answer that question in a way that means that we still have an audience left by the end of the episode? No, of course they know what Perth is.
Of course they do.
But yeah, I'm surprised you do.
Well, I know Australia, at least a couple of the major cities.
What's the capital of Australia?
It's Melbourne?
No.
Sydney?
No.
One of them?
No.
Adelaide?
No.
Oh, I don't know then.
Canberra.
Oh, right, okay.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Tested your Australian knowledge in this film podcast. Anyway, let's get on with the matters at hand. So we are back with season 2, and I think it's a good time to maybe refresh for the listeners what we do on this podcast. So every week we have a little chat. First off, about some news articles that are intriguing us in the world of film and TV. And then we go from there on to a couple of movies. One old movie and one new movie, normally in the other order than that. And they basically have something in common, sometimes tenuously. Today, I think, like smack in the face, obviously.
This is probably one of our strongest links in a while.
I know. But the second movie, the old movie's not that old. It's oldish.
I think we've given up on the idea of the old movie being kind of properly old. But we're pretty smack dab in just choosing movies from the mid to early 2000s, maybe late 2000s, but we're sort of fine sticking in that area.
Yeah, we do some older ones sometimes.
We have
depends on the mood. Depends on how the mood takes us. But anyway, this week we are going to be talking about the brand new mega Netflix hit Glass Onion, a Knives Out story.
Yes.
And following up with that, with Girl with Dragon Tattoo, the American version. The link's pretty obvious, both kind of murder mysteries and both starring Daniel Craig as the...
Daniel Craig extravaganza.
Daniel Craig, not just any Daniel Craig murder extravaganza. So yeah, we're going to start off this year strongly. But first off, if our viewers and listeners, and we have had a few messages recently actually, our viewers and listeners messaging us, which we always love to see. Where would you contact us if you were a viewer or listener?
Well, you can always find us on Facebook and Instagram under Untitled Film Podcast, one word.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about Twitter. We don't really use that. So Instagram and Facebook, us about things. We put questions and things on there. We haven't done one for a few weeks, but we often will have questions and things. And if you are interesting enough, we will read you. Let's be honest, if you write anything, we'll probably read your name out and things on the podcast.
Yes, indeed we will. Yes.
So I think that brings us nicely on to the news.
Yeah, puts a nice little bow on top of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's start with you, Callum. What is your first piece of news for the week?
Well, my first bit of news is a bit of a fluffy one. Is that Marvel is teased on Stan Lee's 100th, or would have been Stan Lee's 100th birthday, that they're going to do a documentary coming to Disney Plus sometime in 2023. Now, these documentaries from Disney Plus, especially when it's about their own products, they're probably not going to go warts and all.
Probably not going to talk about all like the theft and like the litigation,
theft of ideas.
Yeah.
how much credit Stan Lee should have given to his artists over his own writing, because his own writing was often, I am a teenager. What? Spider powers? When the art is often the thing that really made it pop. There are some fans that question how much Stan Lee is a bit of a grifter, a bit of a kind of self-promoter, but that probably won't be seen here. It's probably going to be one of the more fluffy Disney Plus, and he was a genius of the modern age. But I can imagine it will make for good Sunday afternoon viewing, especially if you've just watched a Marvel movie or something, or if you're thinking about it. That's a good thing to sort of put a bow on everything.
Yeah, absolutely. A fun little addition. I quite like. There's been some good shows like that on Disney Plus. I quite enjoyed the one about the Imagineers that designed all the rides and all the theming and stuff for the theme parks. So I found that very interesting, and yeah, that sounds like a very interesting show.
Yeah, it should be.
Speaking of interesting shows, Netflix has got that 90s show coming out on there.
I saw that trailer.
Yeah, which is interesting. So for those that don't know, I'm sure most of you will, but there was a show called That 70s Show that had some really big breakout stars like Topper Grace, Aston Kutcher, and Mila Kunis on it. Was a massive show, I suppose, in the is it the late 90s, early 2000s?
I think it reached 200 episodes, so double syndication.
Yeah, I think it was like 9 seasons or something. It went on for ages. And it had, I always forget her name, Kitty. Who played Kitty? Anyway, it's got 2 big actors. It's got the bad guy from RoboCop as well in it.
Yes.
And they are back. It seems like a lot of the original characters are back with cameos, but it is a whole new cast and it's based on their grandkids. There was that 80s show as well that was attempted with, again, an all-new cast. It was a massive flop. So it's intriguing to see if this is going to be an L. The trailer made it look nothing more than formulaic. I was going to say crap, but I think it maybe is unfair, but like very formulaic, and I didn't quite see the spark from the cast that there was in the original cast.
Well, that tends to be the case with these remakes and reboots and 10 years later adaptations.
Yeah. A bit bland. It looks a bit bland, but we shall see. Maybe it'll be good. I quite like the original That 70s Show even though it's very formulaic, because I do think it has a very good cast and it's quite funny at times.
Absolutely. So you brought it the mild, and actually my first bit of news was mild. A lot of mild. Looks like a nice mild sort of day. Nothing to get angry about, but also nothing to really raise the blood level. Now let's bring the spicy. Have you heard that Courtney Love has accused Brad Pitt of getting her fired from Fight Club? She was the original choice to play Marla Singer, or at least according to her, the role that went to Helena Bonham Carter. The reason why he says that he got her fired was because...
She says,
sorry. Brad Pitt wanted to get the rights to play Kurt Cobain, and Courtney Love basically told him where to stick it. And then not long after that, and again, according to her, she got fired from it. And she says that what she wished she had done was tease him, string him along, saying, oh, yeah, we'll talk later. We'll talk to our lawyers. Yeah, I'm sure you'll buy it. Yeah, you can play. Yeah, definitely. Up until the point where she had filmed Fight Club, or at least according to her. And then after filming the part, she said, actually, Brad, not going to give it to you, because she was interviewed by Mark Maron. And she said that's what in hindsight, that's what she should have done, is just strung him along until she got the parts, until it had been filmed, and then said, no, bugger off. But she told him where to stick it, and according to her, not long after that, she was fired. She even asked Edward Norton, because she was dating Edward Norton at the time, is there anything you can do? And he said, no, I don't have that sort of power. I don't know whether that's true, or any of this is true, because, not dealing with the most trustworthy source in the world, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say 2 things there. One, if I was David Fincher and I was looking at Courtney Love or Helena Bonham Carter,
yes,
I know which one I would have chosen for their acting chops.
I suppose
it's not Courtney Love.
Courtney Love is more obvious for the messy girl part.
But then,
but Helena Bonham Carter, of course, is a much better actor and can act that, whereas I imagine Courtney Love would
just was that.
I
also imagine if you're making was a fairly high budget movie, having someone who's a liability is probably hard from an insurance point of view and things as well.
Also, we have to remember we're looking from a 2022 point of view, where Helena Bonham Carter is held in very high regards, several Oscar nominations, very famous actress. Courtney Love, her fame has slipped quite considerably, but in 1998, she was the she was in the band Hole, which
yeah,
was
but she
quite
wasn't.
big.
But she wasn't an actress. Big. She had done some.
She had
acting,
done some acting.
But she wasn't a big. Like she wasn't a big name.
But
That
she
was
was
like,
probably a bigger name than Helena Bonham Carter in '98. So
I don't know. I don't particularly trust much that comes out of Helena Bonham Carter's mouth. I think half of it's what's the word? Half of it's exaggeration and half of it's flat out lies. Courtney Love, sorry, not Helena Bonham Carter. I believe Helena Bonham Carter in everything she says. Yeah. Well, we'll see.
So that's the spice. That's the spice.
Maybe there was some. What's the word I'm looking for? Some
like a nugget.
Well, yeah, maybe at some point someone had said, "Oh, yeah, you might be good for this role" or something, and then.
And when a movie is being cast, they consider pretty much everyone. So it's possible she auditioned, she screen tested. She may have even been quite high on the list of consideration.
But was it 97?
It was 98 the film came out, but it would have been 97, 96.
They were filming it. Brad Pitt wasn't that big then.
He wasn't huge. He certainly wasn't the big movie star.
Imagine that he would have had like tons of sway to be like, no, don't put that Helena Bonham Carter in there.
But he'd already worked
don't put that Courtney Love in there.
He did work with David Fincher twice, so he may have had a friend inside Root rather than a producer inside Root, and say no, don't cast her. But with these things, it's all speculation. This is pure rumor.
I know who I probably would believe in that situation.
Well, quite.
Not that anyone else has said anything against it. But yeah. Anyway.
So that was a spicy meatball, and now onto your second piece.
Well, my second piece is that in its third week of release, Avatar: Way of the Water has made $1.38 billion globally.
I think they literally just updated this pretty much before it came out. It's now 1.41, something like that.
Well, I'm on Deadline, and it was at 8:53 this morning.
Okay.
That's American time, though, so I don't know what that is now. But anyway, but what's interesting is it's not that big a hit in the US. Like, it's a big hit.
It's
100 million.
400 million has it made?
Yeah,
roughly?
just under.
Yeah.
So it's about $125 million a week, which is, is pretty high.
It's nothing to sniff at.
But it's not.
It's not
the Avatar 1, or it's not Avengers, the Endgame and stuff like that. It's not quite that big. I don't think it's even Spidey big, is it?
Well, Spidey was huge in the US. I think it was 800 million. I think that might be, if not the first, then the second domestic grosser after Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
So it's quite an interest. It's a weird one, Avatar. I think because this is my theory. I haven't seen the new one. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't yet.
You can see me and Callum are really up on the biggest new movie.
I only saw the first one like in lockdown at some point.
Yeah, I can't believe you didn't see that at the cinema. I saw it twice at the cinema, but it was long. But no, anyway, I think the thing with them is there's not that much talking and exposition, and when there is, it's like in one scene, and then it's a lot of like people floating around and stuff.
And it's very simple when it is.
Yeah, so I feel like internationally it probably translates quite well in the same way that Mr. Bean translates well internationally. Like, I remember being once on a boat in Greece, and just suddenly they started playing Mr. Bean because he doesn't speak much, so it's quite easy to watch along. So I kind of wonder if that is part of its charm.
I think a lot of it is.
But it's doing well in China as well, which is interesting because China's hasn't really released many Western films in the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah, so for that to have, which makes me think that there must be a Chinese production company involved somewhere along the line, but I haven't looked that in depth into it. But yeah, it's made almost $200 million there. In the UK, it's made $55 million, which is pretty good. Mexico, 35. Germany, almost $70 million. France, almost $100 million. So it's a big hit internationally, but bigger. Again, 55 million in the UK is a big movie, but it's not.
It's not kind of gargantuan. It's not James Bond.
Being dollars as well, yeah. So what's that? 42 million, 43 million pound probably. Yeah, over 3 weeks, so 10 million a week or 12 million a week. So yeah, it's been big, but interestingly, China, France, Korea, Germany, Mexico, Australia, they don't speak English, do they? Italy and Spain.
I do have to apologise for this continued slander against our Australian friends.
That's not said. I love Australia, really. It's just...
I don't know what this man has against the fine people of Australia.
Actually, I didn't say anything bad about the murder. You just couldn't name what their capital city was.
Well, that's true. Is this going to be a running theme?
Maybe it is today.
Maybe.
I mean, neither our films are made in Australia.
No, they've got nothing to do with it.
Daniel Craig's accent might have gone slightly Australian at points, but...
Perhaps so.
Anyway, we'll talk about these things in the coming moments. But yeah, that's my piece of news. So Avatar 2, despite my... Actually, I predicted it was going to be big, but it looks like it probably will do $2 billion, I would have thought, if it's continues.
I think so. It looks like it's going to be on that track, yeah.
Which just still blows my mind because I saw hardly any advertising for it. Didn't see that. I saw James Cameron doing a few podcasts and things, but I didn't see and it's like when Spider-Man's coming out, Tom Holland is everywhere.
Big push for it.
Yeah, and this just didn't. But then I kind of thought that with the first one, like the trailer only seemed to come out about it was a teaser trailer. It was literally just like a plane going around the planet Earth, and then that was like 9 months before, and then there was just a couple of trailers a couple of months before come out. It didn't have like really long marketing campaigns.
I suppose the lesson is don't bet against Cameron.
Yeah, it is. He just somehow I think it must be the name when people hear James Cameron, Titanic, Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, okay, yeah, we're going to see that.
Yeah,
unless you're us.
Yes, unless you're us.
To be fair, it is on my list. I probably will drag myself to see it at some point, but
eventually, yeah,
when I have time.
Something
I have not enough of. It'll probably go on Disney Plus.
Yes, it will do. It will do.
Maybe I'll watch it on there. Anyway, on to the movies. First one, Glass Onion, a Knives Out story. Would you like to do the synopsis of this one, Cal?
Yes, certainly. So the film takes place several years after the first film. It's set just as sort of COVID is at its peak, and that is quite a big plot point because this tech billionaire, played by Edward Norton, sends several of his friends these mystery boxes. And once they solve the mystery boxes, they find that they've been invited to an island in Greece to do a murder mystery in his off-the-shore mansion, which is the titular Glass Onion. It's shaped like a glass onion. But one unsuspected guest is our hero.
Unexpected or unsuspecting?
Unexpected, because he isn't...
I thought you said unsuspected.
Oh, unsuspected. No, I think I said unexpected.
Well, maybe this is a hint to one of the characters in the movie.
Maybe. And that is our hero, played by Daniel Craig, with his ridiculous accent. Benoit Blanc.
What was that accent that you did then, though?
It certainly wasn't an attempt at whatever his accent is. I think he said it was Tennessee. Tensions are quite high because they're all friends with this tech billionaire, but it's soon found out that they're whatever celebrity or wealth or whatever
it's a bit of a one-sided friendship.
Oh, very much a one-sided friendship. They're all connected to him. They need him to remain friendly because if anything happens, it's them that's going to suffer. And as one suspects in a Knives Out murder mystery, there is a murder. But we can't say who, what, why. It's going to be quite hard to not spoil this one because, I remember when I first went to see it, because I saw it when it was in its brief run in cinemas before it came out on Netflix, I said, I literally can't say anything because everything is a spoiler. So yes, everything is a spoiler except for the fact that it's a murder mystery. There's a murder. It takes place in a literal Glass Onion mansion, and Edward Norton is a tech billionaire who apparently is not Elon Musk. That's what Ryan Johnson's been saying. No, it's not him. It's not him. So what did you think, Jonathan, of Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery?
It's all right, yeah. I'm kind of almost feel like I need to watch it a second time, and the reason for that is a lot of murder mystery things, just in general, once you know the ending, they don't have a great playback the second time, in my opinion. One of the things that I really liked about Knives Out was when I watched it a second time, I noticed new things. But I also just enjoy the acting and the story and the way it's shot, and I think it worked really well a second time, and I'm a big fan of it. And I can't tell if I think this will work as well a second time. on the surface of it, it's bigger, it's flashier, it's got bigger actors in it and things.
Its twists are twistier. Its turns are turnier.
Obviously, its budget's bigger.
Yes.
You can tell, but probably about twice the size, I would reckon, from the amount of giant glass onion buildings and things there are in it. But I do think it had some flaws. I think it took too long to get going with the initial story. I didn't think it did it. I think a lot of the characters were pretty considering how much time it spent building up the characters. I thought most of the characters were fairly one-dimensional. I hope this doesn't work out as a spoiler for anyone, but I kind of guessed the ending. I actually guessed both bits of the ending pretty early on.
Yes, because it's hard. Again, hard not to spoil it, but there are two big things rather than one big thing.
Yeah, and I don't think that spoils it because I think you expect there to be two twists,
and
probably.
Big thing one leads to the bigger thing at the end.
Yeah, and I kind of guessed both of those things fairly early on, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the acting. I thought it was well made. I thought it was well shot, and it's a good. I wouldn't say if you're going to watch it, you're kind of expecting the best Agatha Christie ever, but I kind of feel like most murder mystery stuff that comes out at the minute, and maybe it's what set Knives Out ahead, is quite formulaic and quite similar and samey. And I kind of thought that this is up the top end of that. So I thought it was better probably than both of the recent Poirots.
Yes, there's been two Poirots and by Kenneth Branagh, and of course there's a similar thing called See How They Run, which I haven't seen, but
I have
got mildly positive reviews.
I enjoyed that. I thought it was a bit smaller, a bit more low budget as well, which was kind of fun. But I would put that at the higher end of things. But I think it worked. I think it's a great watch. As I have to say for every movie, it probably could have had 10-15 minutes cut out of it. But yeah, I think I think it's a good fun Rian Johnson romp, and I would recommend watching it.
Generally, I agree with everything. I think that it just hits me a little better because I found it's zippier, and I liked that it focused more on Daniel Craig investigating, because of course the first one, the main character really is not Daniel Craig, it's Ana de Armas' character. So you don't really see a lot of his investigation. You tend to see more of Ana de Armas kind of scrubbing the tracks to put off the investigation, whereas in this you do get to see more upfront of how his brain works. And I think that's necessary for a sequel, because if we're going to keep being in this man's company, we are going to have to sort of spend more time. And I think with the next one, it's going to be... So this one had about 75% focus on him, where the first one had 50, because there is a... And again, I'm not going to spoil this, but there is a secondary character who ends up being a similar sort of presence as Ana de Armas was in the first one, though not quite as much of the focus, but certainly a lot of focus. And I think when the third one comes out, it's going to be a little bit more Daniel Craig, and then I don't know how many they're planning in total. I think
I know there's only one more contracted so far, but it could be Daniel Craig's retirement plan.
It could be, and I think that was wise for this film, because for a murder mystery, the only thing I would say about Knives Out, the first one, is it's not really much of a murder mystery. It's more of a murder mystery being deconstructed as the mystery is kind of going on a little bit in the periphery, whereas this one is more a murder mystery. And I did like that it was a little bit more focused. I also think Daniel Craig, because he realises that this is his retirement plan, I think he got 100 million to make these three, but he doesn't have to do the stuff the baggage that comes with Bond stunts and action scenes, and you could tell he was getting tired of being Bond.
Yeah, he's getting on,
and he's getting on.
He's not everyone's Tom Cruise.
Well, yeah, exactly. And while he is in shape, he is not Tom Cruise, and so this gives him the Bond money without the Bond baggage. And I think what he's always wanted to be is
a lot less marketing. James Bond comes with a lot of marketing because there's a lot of product placement and shit in it.
And I think what Daniel Craig has always wanted to be is to be an adult thriller star or an adult drama star, or even adult comedies. And this gives him the chance, along with Defiance, Edward Zwick's film, and the film we're going to be talking about, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. This is the kind of film he wants to do. And he's having a lot of fun, probably having more fun in this film now that he knows his fortune is secure and that he has a second franchise now. He just...
Not that I think that he probably ever needed to work ever again after having had the James Bond franchise.
James Bond movies. So he clearly, he's skipping along in this film. And I like the focus on him piecing things together as he's watching from the background. There's a lot of him poking his head behind a bush.
Or standing in a pool.
Standing in a pool, yeah. As it blares at him like, warning, do not litter in here. Oh, I'm terribly sorry.
I was thinking that's the biggest stunt he had to do. He had to, like, briskly walk away from a place where he threw a piece of litter on the ground and the floor told him not to have litter.
And this isn't a flaw so much, but it is a problem if it's going to continue, is that this one has a few more cameos, which are fun. Like, I don't think it's a spoiler because it happens in the first 15 minutes. Hugh Grant is Daniel Craig's husband.
Yeah.
Or boyfriend.
That was I was thinking, maybe he'll be in the next one. Maybe he'll have a fun little role in the next one.
And we have Angela Lansbury, Yo-Yo Ma, I believe, was there for a second. Like, some quite eclectic choices.
And a lot of name dropping as well.
A lot of name dropping. And it's fun. But it does get to a little bit of a point where, okay, we get it, Ryan. You're very inventive and clever and silly. Now just tell the story. Because it's a chuckle, but I'd rather just get on with it.
That's where the 10-15 minutes are.
Yeah, exactly. If 10-15 minutes could have been lost from playing Among Us with Angela Lansbury, as fun as that scene was. I don't have any major complaints about it, and I think I enjoyed it a bit more than you did. It's frothy, it's silly, it's light-footed, and I think for an entertaining bit of fluff, that's what I want.
So did you prefer it in the first one?
See, I tried to think about this when I first came out of the cinema, and I think when you come out of the cinema, you're quite bewitched by a film if you like it, and it ends up kind of faltering a little bit. And I said, I might prefer it a little bit. And I think my conclusion now is that the flaws take it down, but they take it down to about the same level because I also thought that its highs were a bit higher. So I think I'd put both films at, I don't want to spoil my rating, but at a similar rating.
Okay, interesting. No, I don't want to sound disparaging. I really enjoyed it. And I think maybe the reason why you saw it before me, I waited till it came out on Netflix.
Yes.
You saw it in the cinema, and you said to me, I think I might have liked it more than the first one, and I think I was expecting to like it more than the first one, and I don't think I quite did. I think I thought it took too long to get going. When it got going, it was great. Having said that, there was a few things that actually I think are very commendable about it. It's the first film that has managed to mention the pandemic in a way that's not like really...
Not in a hand-wavy sort of way.
Yeah, either hand-wavy or just, annoying. And actually it was used as a very good little tell for each of the characters.
Yes.
So obviously when they get on the island, it changes a bit. But when they're in the real world, in the first 10 minutes of the movie, it's not long, it's pandemic times and they're all cooped up in their houses. And each one is slightly a different person, shall we say. And when they all go to the island, and shockingly get to an island, they have to go on a boat. They all turn up at this dock to get on a boat. And their mask-wearing behaviour, I think, tells you a lot immediately about the characters. And I think that's a really smart little thing. And that it's things like that maybe we will talk about a little bit with the next director we're going to speak about, that some people do really well, and you can then go, we can cut another 5 minutes of exposition out because we've told so much about these characters by just this little bit.
Well, both David Fincher and Rian Johnson are very oriented directors. They focus on small character quirks in order to tell a little story. I won't mention it. Something fell off the table. Oops.
But yeah, no, I agree, and I think no. So yeah, I don't want you to. I've got two numbers in my head for my rating later on, but I say it's a watch. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say
easily.
I would say it's definitely worth a watch. Pretty much everyone who's going to be listening to this podcast, I suspect, has Netflix. It's free to watch, and it's probably. There's a reason it's trending, certainly in the UK, as number one film on Netflix at the minute. It's good fun.
Yes, it's a recommend.
Yeah, it's a recommend, exactly. And I think that takes us nicely to an advert break. And we're back with the Untitled Film Podcast with Callum and Johnny. I'm Johnny.
I'm Callum.
And welcome back. So we've just talked about the new Daniel Craig murder mystery, Glass Onion and Knives Out story.
Yes.
And what we're going to talk about next, Callum?
It's the American adaptation of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the big phenomenon of 2005, 2006.
No, it's...
the book series.
Oh, I was going to say, it was later than that.
The phenomenon.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And this was the second adaptation after the Swedish one, which came out, I believe, in about 2004 or 5. And this one came out, I believe, in 2008.
Something along... No, it's later than that.
I think it was later
I think it's about 2012, I'm going to say. Maybe 13, either 12 or 13.
I should have queued this up already.
I think it was Christmas 12 because it came out on, I think, Boxing Day, and they called it they were calling it the feel bad movie of the winter. That was its tagline.
It's 2011. Sorry.
11, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, but yeah, so it's it's my turn, I suppose, to tell you about this movie. So. We open on a James Bond-esque title sequence.
We do. It's a bit gothier, though.
Yeah, a little bit gothier with a Trent Reznor-produced song with Karen O singing on it, singing the
Immigrant Song.
Yeah, the Immigrant Song, which is interesting. I think tells you a lot about where they were thinking about going with this. Obviously, there's 3 books. It was obviously going to be a franchise. This was probably the thing that Daniel Craig thought, oh, great, I don't have to run around so much earlier on until he got Knives Out, which actually is becoming a trilogy. And bar a little bit before that, we start opening with Daniel Craig's character, Mikkel, who has just blotted his copybook somewhat and printed some false information about a not particularly nice Swedish industrialist and has been sued for libel. His journalistic career is in tatters and his finances have been completely wiped out and he is feeling a bit sorry for himself. And along comes a person with an offer that some would say you can't refuse. But to get this offer, these people have done a background check on him. They wanted to find out, well, is he a sleazeball who's been lying about this other person? Or is he squeaky clean? And this enters Lisbeth Salander,
I believe.
Lisbeth Salander, who is a young woman who is a ward of the state, even though she's 23, and is a investigative techno-hacking genius and does a very thorough background check on Mikkel, and he but all this unbeknown to Mikkel, of course, and Mikkel goes and takes this offer from a kind of old fatherly figure of a big Swedish industrial family who have had a daughter who's disappeared, presumed murdered about 40 years before. He's in his last final days and he wants to know what has happened to this. Well, it wasn't his daughter, actually. It was his, what would you call it, nephew?
Yes.
Or niece?
Niece, sorry.
But he'd kind of taken her on because her dad was a drunk and had died. And he is certain that someone in his family is to blame for her disappearance/murder. And he entrusts Mikkel under the cloak of creating a memoir of his life to find out who caused this murder. And that's the start of the movie.
Whole ball of wax.
So, Callum, what did you think of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo American edition?
Well, I have some similar reservations, I think, that you did about Glass Onion. And I think it's best to front load those because I like the film overall, but there are flaws, and I think it's best always to get the flaws out of the way first. I think pacing is quite odd because it's trying to cram a very popular book into 2.5 hours, and it's the same problem that a lot of popular adaptations have, is when the fans expect to see every scene represented. They don't want to take detours or to change or to really adapt. They want to see the book on screen. So what happens is that they end up cramming a 400 or so page book into 2.5 hours, which means that every scene gets playtime, but you have to skip along every little thing, and nuance often gets lost. So, for example, you mentioned that Lisbeth is a ward of the state, and the person that's sort of the original person that is checking in on her, kind of making sure that she's sound, a competent mind, is someone that she admires and loves. And you can see in the first scene where when she's going to see her, she's going to bring her a book, a present.
Yeah.
For him a present. And that really gets a bit lost, because that's the first time you just see this present, and then suddenly he's on the ground. You don't get any of the nuance that this is someone that she admired and respected and loved. And that little problems like that arise, especially through the first hour and a half, is that it just keeps jumping. And it leads it feeling too overstuffed, but also a little bit too thin, kind of a push and pull sort of thing. Is that it only is details, not nuance. And the details of the book are the least interesting things about it, because the murder mystery stuff, it's not nearly as interesting as the tone or the setting or the place. And they get that through with gorgeous cinematography, very great filmmaking, because David Fincher is a fantastic filmmaker, very cinematic filmmaker. So the cinematography does a lot of heavy lifting, where the script and the editing is like, okay, we've got to rush because we've got to tell this story in 2.5 hours. So that's one issue. Another issue is that there is a problem with the book that this sidesteps but doesn't resolve. Is that the character of Lisbeth, it's always been a bit of a battle between representation and fetishization, because the book is written by a pudgy middle-aged, or was, he passed away not long after this book was published, a pudgy middle-aged journalist. And in the book and in the original film, the Swedish film, the main character is a pudgy middle-aged journalist. And guess what? They end up having sex. Oh, really? The 23-year-old girl has sex with the pudgy middle-aged journalist who's a self-insert character. Now, this film solves that a little bit because it's played by Daniel Craig, who's hunky and handsome and stuff like that. But it never quite overcomes the issue. It just kind of pushes it to the side. So those are the major reservations. Also, the accents. Like, some people are doing Swedish or attempting to do Swedish. Some people aren't bothering at all, like Mr. Daniel Craig.
Which, going by his American accent, is probably a good choice.
Probably a wise decision. But that's a minor issue. You stop seeing it after a little while. But once it gets over that, after about an hour, maybe an hour 15, and all the details, all the players have been laid out and all the pieces have been set, it can then focus more on the filmmaking, and the mood creeps back in. The creepiness of the location, because he has to go to this quite remote location, very desolate, snow-covered, and it's a very good setting for a bleak murder mystery. And the filmmaking comes in, the tone really starts pushing bullying its way back in after all the kind of detail, and then some nuance comes back. I don't think it ever quite resolves either of these issues, but at least in the last hour to hour and a half or so, it starts to be a fun murder mystery that is also very bleak in tone after the pieces have been set. Until
the last 20 minutes, when it goes a bit weird again.
It does go a bit weird again. There's a whole subplot about her removing money and putting on a wig, and it's a little bit Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think I can understand why what happened has happened. They're trying to make probably what could have been a 4-hour movie into 2.5-hour movie.
Yes.
But without missing out too many details. And it's something I do like about Fincher. So actually going back to that scene that you used as an example of where maybe it was cut too fast, I actually think worked quite well. She's just been finished talking. You've just seen that she doesn't really get on with people. She doesn't really like people. And you've got this from her character. And then she's sitting waiting in a coffee shop with a book with a little bow on it. Yeah. So you're like, oh, this is a gift for someone. You know that. Then it cuts to her leaving the coffee shop, looking a bit sad. The person didn't turn up. And you think, oh, who's this? Is it a girlfriend? Is it a boyfriend? Is it parent figure? Who is it? And then it cuts and it goes to that person's house, knock on the door. her doing ahoy hoy or whatever she seems to do when she goes
Hey,
into hey. And then realising that person's collapsed and is on the floor. Now, you don't, until the next scene, until someone does a bit of exposition, know who that person is. But I think that actually shows straight away it's probably one of the few people in the world that she cares about. And I thought that did quite a good job of showing that. But I do agree. I think there's a lot of stuff earlier on where they're trying to like... The thing with David Fincher movies is they normally feel quite slow pace, quite flowy, I suppose Fight Club doesn't so much, but most of them, yeah.
I guess deliberate is the right word.
Yeah, very deliberate and where it does feel rushed. The first hour, it feels like they've gone, we need to get this in here. What literally, you could always feel like they've cut around sentences, or they've had a shot with like a bit of exposition and they've gone, we haven't got time for the exposition, the shot will just have to do. And there are bits that I gave another example of why I quite liked them doing that is when he first goes out to go and get this job offer. He has to get the train there. It's a 4-hour train journey from Stockholm, and he's obsessed with getting this 4:30 train, and it's mentioned a couple of times. I've got to get the 4:30 train. I've got to get the 4:30 train. And then when he starts to find out about the murder mystery and starts to get intrigued in it, then it cuts to a very quick shot of the train leaving and just cuts back to them and nothing's mentioned of it. And I think things like that work really well, and that's where David Fincher is very good and is very deliberate. But yeah, I think you can't get away from feeling that first hour feels too rushed.
The filmmaking does more heavy lifting than the script is allowing.
And I think that's it. I think it's a weak script, and I think maybe, dare I say, it's got a lot of fans. I think it's maybe slightly weak source material.
I've never been I think that the problem with the source material is that all the interesting stuff is a veneer, like the goth tech stuff.
For quite a basic story.
For quite a basic murder mystery.
Which kind of makes sense if it's someone's... Because it was pretty much his debut book and stuff, wasn't it?
I don't know,
he may have written books in the past, but it's the first one that got published.
And that's probably why it was so popular, because... if you're taking a book on holiday, you don't want a dense book. You want a fun read, and it is a fun, zippy murder mystery.
It's basically like what's that big murder mystery writer that everyone takes a holiday? Patterson.
Oh yes, James Patterson.
James Patterson. It's kind of a James Patterson book with a bit more of a modern, techie, gothy veneer on it.
Yes, it is.
Which if you
it's
kind of
great, for what it is,
great fun.
But why it's sold millions of copies.
And I think maybe that actually with the script is what they should have maybe gone back to, because there's 1 hour which is almost a perfect movie. Like you'd give it 10 out of 10, but then there's an hour in front of that is tonally and pacingly wrong, and then you've got 20 minutes at the end which is tonally and pacingly wrong.
It is.
And you could almost cut the 20 minutes off the end off and give that to the first hour, and then maybe cut a couple of little bits of storyline out of that, and I think maybe you could then have smoothed it over and made it into a consistent movie. So I think and that's what it seems to be to me. It seems to be a major issue with the script, and it's just off balance, and they've just tried to keep it probably too close to the book, which I know people that love books.
Well, exactly, that's the issue.
But you need to change things when you're making movies.
But you
sometimes.
absolutely do, and I think that's the issue. Is that when you adapt something that's as popular as this, you have to also take into account that the same people who bought the book are going to be buying the tickets, and what you don't want to do is alienate your major opening weekend audience. They're going to be the ones flooding in, so you're sort of beholden to an executive producer that isn't credited as an executive producer, because they're the people that will end up paying your paycheck for this adaptation. So the screenwriter has been put in an awkward situation where they can shift and move and adapt things. Adaption, that's what it is. Like the postscript, the 20 minutes at the end would have been perfect as the opening 20 minutes for the sequel. It would have been pacing would have been a lot better. But
if there was a sequel.
But you just know that if they did that, there would be people, they changed that thing. It's the same issue that the Harry Potter films had, that the Zack Snyder's adaptation of Watchmen had. The more popular the source material, the more of a bind the screenwriter and even the director are in to not leave anything out.
I think it's in a way, and again, all these things come down to dollars and cents at the end of the day. But I think maybe they could have had more. If I can't remember what studio it is. Is it Sony? I think it's Sony.
I can't.
I'm fairly convinced it's Sony. Because I think there was hacks related to it when the whole Hackgate happened.
Yes, I think that was a bit later though.
Yeah, the hack happened later, but there was emails related to it in the hacks.
Oh, I see.
But anyway, I think they'd have been better off committing to 3 movies back to back and filming them back to back. And then that way they could have probably moved things around as need be, worked out what do we need from the whole storyline. But I think because they just signed up on one, they tried to make it work as a single movie in case they didn't make any more. And obviously they didn't end up making any more. Well, they did. They did make a second one, and they changed everything about it. Yeah. The director, the actor. It's
Claire Foy who plays the part, not Rooney Mara.
And it was absolutely critically panned. And I think, and it was quite a lot, it was like 6-7 years later.
Oh yeah, it was a long time later.
It basically got stuck in development hell because it made money. It was one of those weird situations where something makes money, but it doesn't make enough money to kind of justify the sequel in case the sequel isn't quite as good. A bit like Mad Max Fury Road did, although that is getting a sequel now.
It doesn't.
It doesn't kind of go. So they're not like, oh, it was a massive failure, we'll write it off. And I think my understanding of knowing some I think from these leaks and things, that's me knocking the microphone, sorry guys, of these kind of leaks and things that happened was that David Fincher went over budget on the first one, as David Fincher, I think, quite likes to do, because he's very much a perfectionist. I heard one story. When he was in Sweden filming it, he found this dock. There's a scene in a dock that's quite important for the movie. And he was like, I want to use this dock. And it turned out that the dock was owned by one of the people from ABBA on their private island. And it was one of the very reclusive ones.
What are the chances?
And they were just like, no, you're not filming this dock. So instead of going and finding another dock in Sweden, he took photos of that dock and got someone to build that dock in Hollywood and then CGI on the snow, which is a very David Fincher thing to do.
Yes, very much so.
But that in itself cost something like $2 million to do. So a movie that probably could have been made for very nicely and looked great for $80 million ended up costing $120 million. And if it cost $80 million, he'd probably got to make a second one.
Yeah, probably.
Which is a very similar situation to another thing. So I'm a massive David Fincher fan. And Mindhunter, apparently a very similar thing happened. Apparently the second season, he ended up, he wasn't, which is fair enough, but he wasn't happy with the scripts and things. So he ended up getting the scripts rewrited, which then delayed production, which then put the costs up of the production, which then meant people carry the actors' contracts lapsed before the third series could start filming, and it was a lot of stress for him, and it cost Netflix a lot of money. And again, it was something that filmy people like, and it was a really good prestige show for them, but it wasn't something that, it wasn't Stranger Things getting those kind of numbers and stuff, so it didn't really justify that it went $20 million. I don't know how much it went over budget, but I'm just going to say $20 million as a number. It didn't justify that it went $20 million over budget and cost nearly as much as Stranger Things to make, and that was the problem. I don't think David Fincher has a very uncompromising vision, which is what I love about him and I really respect about him. But I think sometimes that doesn't add up with the accountants in the film studios. So sometimes, unfortunately, that kind of knocks on and causes issues, which is a bigger issue. But yeah, I think that is where there is some issues with the film, is that it's part of a series. It feels like part of a series, but they never knew they were going to get all of them made, which I suppose is always the case, almost always the case with series. But
it's true.
And it kind of pushed it off balance. I kind of agree with you from the accent point of view. Just either pick that everyone does their own accents, or everyone should have to do an accent. Don't have some and some. I'd much rather they did a Chernobyl and did it that style than do whatever this is. This is a bit farcical, but at the core of it, it's a very good, fun murder mystery. Cinematically, it's beautiful. The acting overall is all very good. I think it's a very well put together film. Do I think it's David Fincher's best film? No.
Not at all.
No, not close. It's not close to Zodiac. It's not even really close to Gone Girl and things, which, But, it's probably a mid film for him. It's definitely probably better than Panic Room.
It's certainly better than Panic Room.
And stuff. But, I think it's a good fun fun's the word, but a good 2.5 hour movie to watch if you haven't seen it.
And both films, Daniel Craig is completely at ease. I would argue that he's possibly better here than he is with Bond, because his discomfort with Bond started showing.
I only felt like he enjoyed it for 2 or 3 movies, and then it was just too many stunts.
Maybe Skyfall was the last time he was really okay with it, and after that, it was like, I'm just knackered.
But, what year was What year was Casino Royale? It must be about 2006.
2005 or 6.
And last year was the last movie,
Yes.
which admittedly was filmed in 2019.
It was.
So, I mean, he was in his mid-30s when he started.
Yeah, now he's
And now he's in his early to mid-50s.
Yeah, early to mid-50s.
So, I mean, I'm sure I will be able to run better at 35 than I will be at 55, you know.
Well, exactly. I mean, he just
so-
seems tired, whereas here, in both films, he seems to be more at ease doing the kinds of films. Like, these are the kinds of films he wants to do. I think he was interviewed around the time this came out, and he said, you know, what I love about cinema is watching an adult film that's made by adults for adults. And I think this is the kind of thing he wants to be doing for the rest of his career, now that he can.
Yeah, absolutely. No. And I think it's quite nice to... I think he's a good leading man. I like Daniel Craig. I've got a lot of time for
Yes,
him.
me
I've got
too.
a lot of time for him just in general, but as an actor. And I think it comes across well in this movie. So I think that brings us probably nicely to the end of the
Puts a
reviews.
nice little wrap on it, a bow.
So it's time for our little sums up and a score. So Callum, what do you think of Glass Onion?
It's zippy, it's fun, it's frothy. It's very much the kind of thing that is the best of what Netflix do. There are some niggles, but also some very high highs. I think, like you said that you're stuck between two scores. If we could give 0.5s, I would give it a 7.5. But the question is do I bump it up or do I bump it down? And I think the first film I gave an 8, or would give an 8 if we were to review Knives Out. And, you know, if you were to ask me not in a podcast situation, it would be 7.5. But I think I'm going to, for the niggles that are persistent and length and the cameos being a little bit eye-rolling, I think I'm going to kind of go to 7s. So 7 out of 10 for Glass Onion.
I kind of agree with most of what you said, and they were the two numbers I had in my head.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my head, I gave the original 8 out of 10, maybe even an 8.5.
Maybe.
And yeah, I think this, to me, I was leaning towards a 7 as well. I think it's hard to say, because I think it's, from an enjoyment point of view, it's easily an 8.
Yes.
But from a filmmaking point
Exactly.
of view, it's a 7.
It's
and
a
I think
hard
as a
one.
film podcast, I'm going to give it a 7. But maybe as an audience member, I'd give it an 8.
Yes.
That's almost kind of what you said. as
Yeah,
well.
I think Ryan Johnson, he's maybe
crowd pleaser, isn't he?
he's quite maybe too clever for his own good.
Yeah.
He can end up tying himself into knots a little bit to
Yeah, I
show
did
just
think that a
how
little
clever
bit.
he is. And this is something that goes through his entire career, even as early as Brick.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it, almost feel Ryan's elbow in your ribs going, did you get that? Look at that film reference. Did you see how in the background I put that thing? And it's like, yes, Ryan, we did.
Yeah. So no, I agree. And so no, I think so. We're both giving it 7 out of 10. That's
Yes,
quite a, well, I don't know if it's a first, but it's quite a rarity.
I think so.
And so yeah, Golden Dragon Tattoo American edition.
I think that the first hour is quite killer, and the last 20 minutes are too. And it's rather than sidestepping some of the bigger issues that the book has, and the book, in terms of plotting and in terms of some issues that are actually kind of like, especially about the age difference between the main couple and the fetishization of the fact that a self-insert author has given himself a 23-year-old goth girlfriend. It doesn't make it any worse, but it does sidestep them rather than solve them, and that's also of a plotting as well. It's only when David Fincher is really allowed to go unleashed that it really becomes a good, fun film. But unfortunately, that's only for an hour of, honestly, what is actually kind of like Murder, She Wrote, the goth episode. So unfortunately, the flaws are a little bit too overwhelming for me. I have to give it a 6, I think. I think a 6 out of 10. And I would like to give it higher because the good stuff is very good. But the first hour is like, my God, would you calm down with this structure? Just breathe. Go. You don't have to adapt every single scene just because it's there. And they started to annoy me a little bit. And then when it stopped annoying me. I was like, okay, fine, but I don't think it ever got. You said when it's good, it's a 10 out of 10. I don't think it ever was a 10 out of 10 for me, but it came close in places. But I think
I said close to a 10 out of 10.
I think I was more 8 out of 10 when it was good, but that first hour and last 20 minutes, like, good lord, this is stressing me out. This structure, just stop for a minute, calm down. But yeah.
I liked it more than you, I think, overall. I liked that middle section. If the whole movie was as good as that middle section, which, like, you know, it's not quite Zodiac good, but I would give Zodiac as one of the few movies I'd ever give a 10 out of 10 to.
Yeah.
Which I think you probably agree with.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, it gets close to those highs at points. But the first hour is a bit of a mess. And the last 20 minutes is a bit unneeded. But I do like the atmosphere. I love the Trent Reznor sound. Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross. I must forget about Atticus Ross because he does a lot of it. I like the acting. I like it overall. If the whole movie was that movie in the middle, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. If that whole movie was the first hour and the last 20 minutes, I'd give it somewhere between a 5 and a 6 out of 10. So I'm going to split the difference and give it a 7.
Nice.
So slightly higher.
Slightly higher.
But yeah, I still think it is a flawed movie, and I actually think the teaser trailer for it is one of my favourite trailers of all time.
I remember that trailer. It caused a big fuss. It was big in Filmland.
Yeah, and I was really, really excited for it, and I did enjoy it. And it's that whole thing when you're really excited for something, you maybe like it a little bit more than you should at the time. And actually now watching it 10 years, 11 years later, which blows my mind that it was that long ago.
I know. Quite mad.
Yeah. And I don't like it as much as I liked it 11 years ago, put it that way. So no, that's the reviews of the week. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening once again. Have a happy new year.
Yes, have a happy new year.
Enjoy this 2023.
Lots of fun in store for you for the upcoming year.
And cheerio for now.
And see you later.
Bye.